Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Content Patch for the 6th of November 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Dawngate will be shut down in 90 days, and Grand Theft Auto 5 will feature first-person mode. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. Matt Bromberg, the group general manager at Waystone Games of EA, has been given, quote, the unenviable task of announcing that they've decided to stop development on Dawngate. Dawngate is a MOBA or Dota-style game that was being developed by Waystone, which was a studio that was created under the EA banner and contained much of the old Darksport team. He went on to say in his statement that he knows that this is disappointing news for the community that has been very supportive and loyal, and that they knew when going into this that this would be a very competitive marketplace. This is, of course, not the outcome they wanted, he said, but beta testing is about learning and improving, and ultimately about making difficult decisions about how to proceed. They offered a full refund for those that had spent money during the beta, which ran for a full 18 months, and thanked the community for their support. This is actually very sad to me, because I really enjoyed Dawngate a great deal. In the statement, he claimed that they set out to build a game that wasn't simply a clone of existing MOBAs, but one that actually pushed the genre forward. And frankly, I would agree that, at least to some extent, Dawngate did push the genre forward. It took a look at some of the fundamental, I wouldn't say problems, but mechanical eccentricities that happened to be core to the genre, and decided, look, maybe we can change some of these, and maybe, just maybe, some of these mechanics and ideas and design philosophies are getting in the way of some people actually enjoying the genre. And that's very important for the development of a genre. You've got to look at what, of course, your predecessors did, what the current popular genre-defining games are doing, and say, well, can we differentiate ourselves enough for that, and can we do it in a way that's important to the advancement of the genre? Don't be different for different's sake, but be different because you believe that this design decision will actually make the game better for a certain group of people. And Dawngate did that. A lot of people compared it to League of Legends, and I don't necessarily think that's a fair comparison. It certainly had some similarities, but there were many things within that game that were very different. The design of the map, for instance, it was a very large jungle-focused map with only 2 lanes. It also had secondary objectives in the form of 4 spirit wells, 2 of which by default were owned by each team, and they would generate passive income over time. You could raid those wells and kill the miners, or you could capture them entirely in order to gain the income for your own team. And that was a great way of using a PvE objective to be able to deny consistent revenue to the enemy. And it also set up a new role in the form of the Predator, which would gain extra experience and rewards for doing just that. And speaking of roles, they had this so-called flexible meta system where you would pick your hero, but then you would also pick a role for that hero. It would be either gladiator, tactician, hunter, or predator. And each of those would gain benefits for doing different things. So if you were playing the support role, i.e. the tactician, you would gain money every time that you were able to do damage to another player. So that means that your role was very much that of a harasser, and you'd also gain additional money for kills of minions in your general area. So the traditional problem of supports very much not earning an awful lot of gold and having to be very passive in lanes for quite some time, which is the case in some games in this genre, was sort of removed, and the role was made more specific, and you were specifically rewarded for participating in it. The side benefit that this ended up having is that you could pick pretty much any hero, and if you picked the right role, then that hero would be able to do a reasonable job at it. So there was a lot more flexibility in the heroes that you could play in particular roles, which simultaneously meant that those with limited hero pools, because they hadn't acquired a lot of heroes yet, were able to take on different roles and be sort of less of a problem for their team. It had some really cool ideas behind it. I like the art style as well. A lot of people compared it to League of Legends. I personally think that their statement about it being inspired by Studio Ghibli stuff is a little bit more accurate, and the pastel shading in particular differentiated itself from the color riot that is League of Legends, no pun intended. They also had a neat reward system where you could get drops, which would include unlocking new heroes for you. It was a nice game. I think it was well put together, and I enjoyed my time with it. So it's very sad to see it going this way. It's not, however, entirely unexpected. Firstly, we're dealing with EA. EA, the company legendary for pulling the plug on so many projects and studios. They have a long history of this, and I was a little worried that this would happen, and unfortunately it seems like it's gone that way. Secondly, they're not wrong. It's a highly, highly competitive marketplace at the moment, And there are several games which you could consider dominant in it to various degrees. The most dominant game right now is League of Legends, followed by Dota 2. And then there's a couple of less popular but simultaneously still very viable games like Smite, who have several million players in their own right. And then you've got a bunch of up-and-comers, not only on iOS devices and consoles, but also on PC. Games like Strife, for instance, that are trying to make the genre simply more accessible. And then there's those little guys off to the side that are just doing their own thing, like Awesome Nauts and, unfortunately, the now failed Super Monday Night Combat. It is a difficult genre to get into because, ultimately, I think it's quite difficult to innovate in it while simultaneously interesting people in trying it out to begin with. That's very, very tricky. It's hard to tell someone, look, you should really leave the game you're currently playing and have dedicated hundreds of hours to, bearing in mind that this is a genre which requires that in order to get even the slightest bit good at it. And say, come and play us instead. I know you've probably committed money to your account already and you've spent hundreds of hours advancing it, but try us. That's really hard to do. And I think that a lot of it really has to do with this idea of the persistent account. And it's something that some games are trying to get rid of and some games are committed to. Heroes of the Storm is probably the biggest example of this. That game could fall flat on its face, but simultaneously it could actually work if it's able to situate itself in such a way that it becomes kind of the Mario Kart or the Smash Brothers of the Dota genre. It becomes a game that people that play various different games within that genre will come together and just do a couple of quick sessions in. But it's got its own problems. It's still committed to the progression system, which means that if you jump into the game, your character will be less powerful because he has access to less abilities, and the talents are very much gated by level. That's something that needs to be fixed. And of course, that game also adopts a you've got to pay in-game currency for characters or buy them or rely on the weekly rotation model. And I think that could potentially hurt it a great deal, even if it's Blizzard actually backing it. But that game is very different to existing games within the Dota genre. Extremely different. It's barely recognizable. In the way that it handles, absolutely. But in terms of its game mechanics and game flow and even the speed of the game itself and the focus on objectives, I think that game is very different. And it's a good advancement for this genre. But I don't know how successful it's going to be. Thankfully, it's backed up by a lot of money, and not backed up by a publisher that is apparently terrified of really pushing a lot more into this particular game. And it just seems ridiculous that after 18 months of development, and after they released an open beta that is very, very good, it's complete, it works well, it loads well, it's got a lot of content, it just seems ridiculous that they will pull the plug on that. I don't know how much cost has been sunk into this damn thing, but I cannot imagine. I really just don't know, and I think it's probably going to be several months until we know the full truth behind this, assuming that we ever do and that the employees are not bound by non-disclosure agreements. But I can safely say that I'm really sad because that game had a lot of potential. And maybe this is a genre that some studios are going to be very, very wary of getting into right now. This reminds me way too much of the MMO genre, but I'd imagine that making a Dota-style game is a hell of a lot easier than making an MMO. It costs a lot less money, but still we're seeing failure after failure in it, and it's very difficult to keep your head above water in a very competitive free-to-play space. And evidently, people are not willing to pay money outright to play a game like that. You can't put that kind of barrier in the way of a Dota-style game, as we saw due to the initial failure of Heroes of New Earth and Guardians of Middle-earth. I think it's only Awesome Nauts that's managed to rise above that, and it had a fairly cheap price to begin with, and let's be honest, it's been on sale for a few dollars quite often. It also does a lot of different things, so... Well, best of luck to the guys behind that. They were clearly a talented developer. I enjoyed their game a great deal, and it's just sad to see it go. And finally, Rockstar has revealed that they will be including an official first-person mode in the next-gen and PC versions of Grand Theft Auto 5. Video footage of this mode was unveiled on IGN and included gunplay as well as driving with various vehicles and cockpits, some of which were shown to have animated dials and inputs. When asked as to why this was not included in the previous versions on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, the developers claimed, quote, "We've always been interested in it, but it's never really been an option for us. I don't think we could have put it in the last-gen version because we're too busy making the game, we were too busy working on our third-person controls and the missions, and we were out of memory for animations on the old consoles. We were constantly fighting about what we could have, what we could still push in, and what areas you could steal memory back from, audio art maps for animation. So we could have added all the atoms to make a first-person mode to the level we wanted, we weren't sure the world would have held up the way that we wanted it to if we had. Rockstar also went on to clarify that it wasn't as simple as merely changing the camera. They said you don't just put the camera down there and expect to see the guns, aim, and shoot. All these animations are new when you switch to first person because it all has to be animated to the camera to give a proper first person experience that people would expect. All the timings have to be re-evaluated. They claimed that they created 3,000 new animations on weapons alone. More information continues to come out regarding the next-gen remastered ports of Grand Theft Auto 5, including the fact that the PC version will support full 4K resolution, and that the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 versions will render at 1080p, however they will be restricted to 30 frames per second, and we are assuming, of course, that the PC version will not. So it does seem like they're focusing a little bit more on the PC version, which is nice because Rockstar historically has not done that. And Grand Theft Auto 4 was legendary when it came out for running just wildly different ways on huge numbers of different configurations. Like, the optimization issues with that game were real, and some of it was fixed when they released episodes from Liberty City, but still, it was not particularly well optimized, and Rockstar has historically stayed away from PC for the most part and have neglected to port over classics such as Red Dead Redemption to the platform. So I think there's a healthy amount of skepticism in the air right now as to whether or not the PC version will actually end up being any good. They do have some history, but also some of the games they've released on PC have not run very well. Max Payne 3 was a pretty good port, but Bully was not. LA Noire had issues being locked at 30 frames per second, and while of course San Andreas ran fairly well, we had GTA 4 not running so well. It really has been a mixed bag, and it just doesn't seem like Rockstar has ever really prioritized the PC for quite some time, and they've also been known for bundling some fairly unpleasant online stuff in, like Rockstar Social Club, which people didn't really like, and of course we also had the infamous Games for Windows Live rearing its ugly head. What I would hope is that this is a move forward when it comes to porting to PC, and that they do seem to be demonstrating an interest in it. I like the idea that the game will support 4K. Admittedly, right now there aren't that many machines that can really run it, but it's nice that that level of support is there nonetheless, and I think that also means that perhaps they recognize that GTA 5 might be played for a good number of years to come. I mean, hell, San Andreas still is, with of course the online mods and things like that. I would be more interested to see what kind of modding support Grand Theft Auto 5 will have, if anything. That said, of course, that's not really stopped most people. GTA 4 didn't have much mod support either, but they still managed to do some fairly incredible things with that. So, I hope that there's at least lip service paid to it by Rockstar. I don't necessarily expect it, but really, GTA 5 could run for many years to come on PC if it had that level of support. But this is Rockstar we're talking about here, so perhaps don't hold your breath on that one. I've got to say, though, I'm very interested in the first-person mode. In fact, I'd probably play the game that way. When I first heard about GTA 3 and, of course, the transition to 3D, I thought, wow, that sounds amazing. Being able to drive around in a fully 3D rendered city, that sounds incredible. And then, of course, in third person, it's just maybe not quite as immersive. And I do want to immerse myself in that open-world fantasy, and I think that's something that many games have avoided doing. Open-world games are traditionally in third person. We don't have that many running in first person, and those that have first-person modes, they're generally just token when it comes to driving. You don't have a dashboard or anything along those lines, so it's very exciting to see this game move in that particular direction. And I haven't played GTA 5 yet because, of course, it was only on console. I didn't want to play it, so by the time it comes out on PC, I think I'll be enjoying experiencing it in first-person perspective. Hopefully, it will be good. It certainly seems promising, but again, maintain a healthy level of skepticism, please, when it comes to Rockstar's ports to PC, which have been historically checkered. Let's just put it that way. Alright, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, but before I go, I would like to give you the OC remix track of the day, of course. In this case, we're going to go with a piano arrangement. This is a reinterpretation of the songs Lost Painting and Marble Gallery from the title Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is an effort by Annette, DiMedio, and Farkle, and you can download it in the description below this video. I'll see you next time.